right, thank you. Thanks, everybody. We're really excited that you all came out for EDITFEST today. And I am super excited to be talking to all these fine panelists. So we are going to start, we'll have each panelist show a clip and describe it a little bit. And then once the clips are done, we will launch into our discussion. So we're going to start with Peter Beyt. Peter, why don't you give us a few words about the clip we're about to see?
I chose this one when we started talking about it because of the way the industry has changed for me. When I started long ago, it was, you know, back in the first days of computer editing, and I'm not talking about Avid, I'm talking about being able to do time code editing to reassemble a show, to today, where we start to push pixels around. And this is a really good example of pushing pixels. So the first part you're going to see is actually the way it aired. And then the second part you'll see is where I got the source pieces for the first part. But you'll also see things like a character Jacques standing next to Grace, where in the first piece you'll see Grace isn't there. So we've removed it. There's so much pixel pushing going on in the process nowadays further down the line. And this is a good example, but it's funny. So let's watch that.
Can you pass the...
I knew you'd bring it up. You just couldn't wait to throw it in my face.
Throw what in his face?
I don't even know what you... Oh, right.
Ooh, tell me. I'm missing something. Gossip, go.
Do not tell her.
Your secret is safe with me. And Grace. So, last night, Jack and I are at the cockpit. He's hitting on this 20-something who says, and this is the good part,
Ugh, daddies love me.
I'm sorry.
Really, Grace? Peekaboo sleeves? Aren't you begging someone to just peek and then boo?
oh, so this other young guy starts hitting on me.
I hope this doesn't weird you out, but I think you're really hot. You're like an anchor man.
This just in.
Oh, you're sweet. Okay, I think I need to know everything about you, okay? What's your behind the music? What's your unsolved mystery? What's your true Hollywood story?
Well, my name's Will. I'm a partner in a law firm. Grew up in Connecticut.
Oh my God, do you know this song? Wait, I'm so sorry, I'm the rudest. I have the worst ADHD. Hey, come on.
I'm sorry, Jack. I guess some people age like an anchor man and others like a meth head mother of 9. To reiterate, anchor man, meth head mom.
Hey, who wants a drink? Will's buying. I'll have a 7-Up, 4 cherries. No, 5. Wait, 4. No, 5. 4 in the glass, 1 on a toothpick. The daddies love me.
He's not looking at you.
Ugh, daddies love me.
Did he just call me a daddy? I'm not a daddy. If anybody's a daddy, it's Will.
Well, it looks like Daddy's gonna be home late tonight.
I hope this doesn't weird you out, but I think you're really hot. You're like an anchor man.
This just in.
Oh, you're sweet. Okay, I think I need to know everything about you, okay? What's your behind the music? What's your unsolved mystery? What's your true Hollywood story?
Well, my name's Will. I'm a partner in a law firm. Grew up in Connecticut.
Oh my God, do you know this song? Wait, I'm so sorry, I'm the rudest. I have the worst ADHD. Hey, come on.
George Jamal Clooney, Will's a dill!
All right, next we have Jacques Gravett. Jacques, tell us a little bit about your clip.
Good morning. This is just one clip. It's from the series 13 Reasons Why. It's a rather simple scene. 2 actors in the scene sitting down, but what's interesting about it is these kids are in high school, and it's about basically talking about a breakup. So I chose it because of the beauty of the scene. Michael Morris was the director, the way he shot it, the way he set it up. and lots of choices. But it was just a nice, beautiful, simple scene. And I think just remember these kids are in high school. But what's interesting is one of the actors, she has recently tried to commit suicide herself. She's been cutting her wrist. So this is kind of the aftermath. And she's moving on with her life. And Clay has yet to kind of move on with his life. So that's what this scene is about.
What are you thinking about? What are you thinking about? Come on, tell me, what are you thinking about?
I don't know.
You're not saying.
I have so many thoughts.
Give me one.
Infinity.
It's an infinity ceiling.
No, it totally is. Look at it. Infinity. It's funny how we have a word for that concept, but there's no way we can understand it.
Maybe love.
Love?
Maybe love is how you understand infinity. When your love has no limits, when it goes on forever. Maybe that feels like infinity.
Huh. Yeah, maybe. How are you feeling?
I feel fucking great. At this moment, I am not afraid of anything. I am fearless.
I feel peaceful. But it's just the drug, right?
Is it? Didn't these feelings have to be somewhere inside of us for the drug to find them?
I'm not sure that's how it works.
Do you believe we have a soul?
I don't know, I hope so.
If you could see the future, would you want to see the future?
No.
You answered that fast.
Well, like, can I change the future? Because if I can see it and I know what's coming and there's nothing I can do about it, then it's just anxiety.
You can always change the future.
So you don't believe in destiny?
I do, I just believe it can change.
This is where I say, that's not the clip I set up. That's a totally different clip than the one I set up. That clip is between Clay and Hannah. They have been doing drugs. They've gone off to another room, hence the way it's shot from the ceiling and cutting back and forth. So, but that's Clay, that's Hannah. That's 13 Reasons Why. They're high school kids, they're taking drugs, they're messed up. It was directed by Michael Morris, and I did cut it.
2 out of 3.
Yeah, so there you go. Welcome to EDITFEST.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. All right, next we have Tim Porter, who is currently working and has been working on Game of Thrones. So Tim, why don't you set up what we're about to see?
Hey, something from Battle of the Bastards, and I chose this because I've never seen it on the big screen, so I'm going to go over there and turn around. It was a couple of years ago now that we did this, but it was, about 25 days filming in a field in Belfast, 80 horses, 300 extras, and a lot of love went into this.
All right.
Now.
Men, stand down.
Wow. In case you haven't watched this show, you should watch it. And now we have Meaghan Wilbur, who most recently cut the Two Dope Queens episodic special on HBO. So Meaghan, why don't you set up your clip?
Thank you. Two Dope Queens is a podcast by Jessica Williams and Phoebe Robinson, and HBO did a comedy special. So per the format of their podcast, each episode has a theme or a topic, and the clip you're going to see is from the hair episode, where Sarah Jessica Parker was the guest, and they talked about different types of hair that not all people might know about, how ladies' hair works. I'm not showing that clip, but it's a really cool episode. You should check it out. This comes from the monologue that is at the top of this episode. And the way these are structured is that Jess and Phoebe come out and they do their a stand-up bit. But the cool thing about working on a show that is, let's say, loosely scripted, and working with comedians who are practiced performers, is that improv often breaks out and spontaneous moments happen on stage. And doing a live a live-to-tape show on a stage like that allows for a lot of theatrical moments to break out. And in the middle of this clip is one such spontaneous moment that was unplanned. And you can watch the 8 cameras kind of try to chase them around the stage and see how we clean that up in editing to make it more pleasant to watch. Enjoy.
I will say one of the coolest ones that I do get sort of nostalgic about is my mom used to do French braids down to beads.
Oh, that's
which was
yes.
really cute. But she would put aluminum foil on the ends. And so whenever I go play and do like a whole day of school, I would come back home. She's like, "You missing a strand of beads?" And I'd be like, "Well, we were practicing tumbles. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
How is that my responsibility? I'm 6.
You practice tumbles?
You didn't tumble none? I wanted to be Dominique Dawes.
That's great. I recognize what she did, and I appreciated it, but I just like didn't do that. I just like watched Oprah and Living Single, and just that was what I did.
I love that Baby You was watching Living Single.
Yeah.
That's so fun. It explains a lot, actually.
I was like, I identify with these 40-plus women. Like, I really was just like...
Yeah. I will say, maybe that's why we get along, because the woman that I identified with as a kid was my grandmother, and she was this very large, overweight woman who sat around the house naked, and we watched like Hercule Poirot and Murder, She Wrote, and that shit was popping. She'd let me eat whatever I wanted. Yeah. She would like be naked sitting on the couch like this. It was just the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen.
So I remind you of a...
No, I was
80-year-old
saying,
naked woman.
No, I never even said that. This is intense. I literally never said that. We could play it back in post, but I did not say that. But I was saying that I identified with that when I was young, and that was like the only person that I wanted to hang out with when I was little.
Okay. Great.
So I, was hanging out with older people.
Right. And so I am your older...
You want me to say you're my grandma that's sitting naked with her titties out?
I don't want you to say that. I feel like you just said that on HBO special.
I didn't.
I have to stay forever young for the industry, okay?
Don't hit all of our cameras that we're sharing together. How dare you? I got this back camera and I got this camera back here, so... It was okay. It wasn't that impressive. It was fine.
What if that's like how I had sex, like with my boyfriend? He was like, "Get on top," and I was like, "Okay, 1 second."
Even that is too strenuous. Even that is too strenuous, but I feel like I would do it, like I would be like, "All right, and we're in. We're in. I'm in. I'm lowering. I'm lowering. I'm lowering. I'm lowering. Is that okay?" I do find actually that is actually what it looks like.
Okay, so
just like a run and jump on, like threading a needle.
You're leaping onto dicks.
It just seems fun when you see it there. When you see it there, and that's what you've been like a monster about for the last 6 minutes. You just want to run and Dominique Dawes and just jump right on it.
No. I want to lie. I'm 33. I want to lie down.
I'm 28, and I still have all of my years ahead of me.
I am the Rosa Parks of this bedroom. I'm not getting up for any white man.
Do not bring her into this.
I'm not getting up for any white man. I'm lying down.
Do not bring her into this. Do not bring her into this.
Sorry, Rosa.
Yeah. All right, so clearly we've seen a wide variety just in the 4 clips that you all showed. And I think what's really interesting about all of them is that the episodic programs that you're working on that really are for a smaller screen, right? These all air on TV or they stream or whatever. They're all quite cinematic, and the production values are really high, and the way you go about making them is fairly complex. So I want to start by having you each talk about how you think about approaching your project. So Peter, like with you, you were in the Cinema Editor magazine recently, and you were talking about the Will and Grace reboot and your approach to editing, and you mentioned that it is like making a movie. It's more like making a movie than maybe other episodic shows you worked on 10, 15 years ago. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. In fact, for this season, when I'm done in 7 months, within 7 months, I will turn out 6 hours of finished product. Each show, about 20 minutes long, 21 minutes long, has about 1,600 edit decisions. And that's just that's not even them going down in the sound library. That's just me putting in temp sound stuff. When I started, when I was in school, when I was a kid, I went to a screening of MASH. And it was in a theater like this, and it was film projected, and we watched grease pencil dissolve marks and tape go by and everything like that. And that's how they screened a TV show, because they cut on film back then. And then when I got my first sitcom, it had gotten to the point where, you know, Archie Bunker and those shows were shot on tape, but they were shot as complete scenes. And they had to go in, you know, and razor blade in between the scenes on the 2-inch tape in order to make edits. So you weren't making edits on cameras, you were making block edits on the scene. The first sitcom I ever did was for Ron Howard's and Showtime, and it was from that generation where we used a lot of the switched feed. Back then, people rehearsed. People could do it in front of a camera. You would see it. They could play things in one long shot and stuff like that, although you had some good actors in yours that managed to get through several speeches in one shot. Comedy, that doesn't happen very often, I want you. So when I got to Golden Girls, I started reassembling the show from camera original. Each shot, each camera original. And that's when I started to gain control over timing and everything. And that's when the industry changed. Sitcoms changed along that mat. And it was the children of Danny Thomas and all those people who made Soap and later made Golden Girls, and who developed the process, like Desi Lu developed the process for shooting camera, you know, film for Lucy. So that was great, but it was always a stage play. It was always, we would come in, we would shoot one show in the afternoon with one audience, we would get a new audience, we would talk about what went right and what went wrong, we'd shoot another show with another audience, and I had performances to choose from, but it was pretty straightforward. Currently, on Will and Grace, you're lucky if you come to one of our tapings and get a whole show in one night. We shoot fragmented pieces all over. Who's the star? Oh, they're only available here. It's so much hybrid single camera method. But they expect you to produce it just as like a multicam, just like as simple. So my 1,600 decisions become, because every shot, everything is a performance change. Actors no longer rehearse for the hours on end, or they're not the Betty Whites or the people. By the way, so I was 25 when I got Golden Girls, and I made it through my first 2 weeks of trial. You know, so they introduced me to the actors, and Betty White, she comes up and she says, "Come here, I gotta, you know, have you ever heard about opposite side of the street parking? A friend of mine in New York has got a problem with opposite side of the street parking." I said, "No, Betty, no, I'm sorry." I was 25. She knew that I was a green, naive little boy, okay? She says, so my friend was driving in New York, and he got to the street, and the sign said opposite side of the street parking. Nobody's parking on that side of the street. Everybody's parking on this side of the street. He didn't know what to do, and then somebody pulled out from that side of the street, so he parked in that spot. As he's getting out the car, he hears, "Hey!" And he looks up, and there's this woman on the balcony of the apartment building. She says, "Come on." And he's like, "What? You know? Okay, you know, it's New York. He's going to try it. He's going to go." So he finds the apartment building. He gets up. He goes up to the right floor. He gets off the elevator. He looks down, and there she is at this corner. And come here. I'm 25, okay, I'm green. He walks to the door. This is Betty White too, right? All right. He walks to the door. She says, pull it out. What? Pull it out. She gets down on her knees. She takes it in like her hand like this. She says, don't you ever park my husband's spot again. Those people could do a joke. They could run a whole scene without ever a bump in it. It was so much different as a teleplay. Now I'm making little movies because everything is in bits and pieces and it all comes up.
Well, and like you showed in your clip, you're taking people completely out of
Well, then
scenes,
that's
right?
even gets to further part of rewriting, because now, you know, I have great writers. I mean, fun, but it's, you know, it's a volcano, right? We spurt out these giant things of lava and they come out really beautiful, but it's very violent inside at times, right? And it can be, but. In this case, you know, this was the first season back. We had, starting off on a gay bar was not a good thing. The network has asked us to be less gay because it is, you know, and that's okay. We understand their financial issues and stuff like that. But so, and we wanted to start our scene in our set. So by chopping that first scene out and putting it in the second, we had to go back and reshoot a couple of pieces so that Jacques would tell Grace the story and everything, and then use that whole scene, because remember, our production schedule is, once that set is gone, it's not coming back up. These guys have such beautiful design in their process. I mean, when I looked at his thing, I thought, oh my God, everybody's playing on the same page. Everything's happening. I get a show that the writers and everybody have fought over for weeks. The cast have fought over for a week. Mr. Burroughs has shot it, and then they just dump it on, and it's in kind of scattered. And I don't want to say it's a salvage job, but it is a house of cards every build.
So let's.
There's no plan, like.
Yeah, so let's actually contrast that, because you all work on very differently organized kinds of programs. So like Meaghan, with Two Dope Queens, they shot each episode one time with 8 cameras, and that's what you had to work with.
And no line cut.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
in case you were wondering, it was not live switch, and I do.
Line cut is gone.
It's gone. I've come from a line cut situation. Conan's late night show is the studio portions are obviously there's a line cut to work from, but at that show, the same team that does, we didn't have a separate team for the pre-tapes from the studio show. So the same 4 editors did all the pre-tapes that rolled into the live show at 4:30. And speaking of theatrical, when you have a performer, Betty White has been on the show and I adore her. And Conan is that level of performer. He's also ostensibly the head writer of that show, because when he goes out in the field and does his unscripted pieces, when he goes and does what they call the remotes, or when he does those travel shows, he just goes and performs. And he's working on footage like that when it's unscripted comedy is a tremendous treat, because he does perform, like you mentioned, in that style of it's polished, it's rehearsed. He resets himself. It's incredible as an editor to watch someone just, as they're speaking, just kind of stop and back up like that and quietly, without pointing it out, rephrase what they just said so that the joke lands better. And he kind of finds the punchlines and things, and he puts them there for the editors to find, and the story kind of evolves. So in like 2 hours of footage that becomes a 7-minute piece, there's a lot to work with. But then, you know,
with Two Dope Queens, they also had.
I had rehearsals.
And they had special guests.
They had rehearsals. They had special guests.
Yeah.
They had rehearsals, and because they're polished performers who, in that same way, they do the podcast kind of off the cuff. They did the stage show the same way. It was never clear to me how much of it was scripted, but like most stand-ups, you know, they have bits that they've rehearsed more or less, or maybe because they just hang out so much, the two of them have this incredible rapport. So the steal my cameras bit where Phoebe runs around the stage, that's spontaneous.
It's a certain unique personality that can do this, because in the past, what we used to call it is magic in a bottle. Anytime it's live comedy in front of an audience, it's so different from what they gave. These guys can take horrible actors and make them really good, right?
I work with what I'm given.
I've seen it happen. Because it's drama, there's not they don't need the internal rhythm, the internal thing.
Very
because
true.
They can, huh?
Very true.
Yeah, I know it.
Very true. It's very true.
You get to
And
some of
that's
these
the
people
magic.
and you go, oh my God, this is what they really perform like? And you go,
Well,
no.
so, and Jacques, so your show has a lot of quieter moments, a lot of like one-on-one conversations, small moments, whereas Tim, obviously Game of Thrones has some of those moments too, but then like Battle of the Bastards, it's skazillions of people and tons of choreographed action, and it's super complex. So, and yours is a show where obviously there's a ton of effects work, right? There's a lot going on to make that show happen. Jacques, what is your show like when it comes to really like tailoring those performances or doing the kind of work that Peter was talking about, you know, with his program, where maybe you're taking someone out of a scene completely, or like, tell us about the kind of coverage that you're working with and how you really approach the edit.
So I approach it by its story. So when I get the script, I've read the script, of course, a couple of times. And once I see the footage, I kind of see how it's lining up, because I know that ultimately I've got to please the showrunner. In this case, in 13 Reasons, they hire a lot for Netflix. I'm sure there's many of you out there worked on Netflix shows. They hire a lot of indie film directors, so their vision is a little bit different generally than the showrunner. So, you know, as editors, we're often put in that bind. You know, we got to please the director, we got to please the showrunner. So, 13 Reasons, they block shoot. So for season 2, which I worked on, episodes 1 and 2 were shot at the same time. So I've got dailies they shoot for 16 days. So it's like putting together a small 2-hour movie. But I have to deliver my editor's cut for episodes 1 and 2 at the same time. So I approach it that way. It's like a 2-hour block that I approach. But I just try to make sure that the director doesn't go too far into his own indie movie, which can happen.
Right.
Which is challenging because I'm with the director for 8 days. So, but my approach is pretty simple. Is the footage lining up to the vision of the script, because I know that's ultimately where we need to go. And anything that's in between, of course, I listen to the director. I take his or her direction in terms of, you know, changing things. A lot of times I'm within, you know, we're on the same page in terms of where we're going. It's just a matter of fine tuning. And if we're not, then just kind of step back and have that conversation, do it his or her way. And then maybe if it's something I really feel strongly about, I'll come back to it maybe the next day with the director. Hey, you know, we were working on that scene earlier, Clay and Hannah. I think it's a little too cutty. Let's try to let it play a little bit more. The audience is going to be a little disoriented because the camera's up here, then we're down here. So I try to make it simple, and in making it simple, you know, finding those best performances, those gems. Yeah.
So Tim, kind of completely different world with Game of Thrones. Like I said, it's so complicated, and there's often these enormous scenes with animals and ammunition and people dying and all sorts of stuff. How do you approach an edit for not even a whole episode, but just like for that scene, which goes on for, how long is the whole scene? Maybe 15?
More than that, I think it's, I can't remember how long it is. From top to tail, I think it's about 30 minutes once the battle starts. It's obviously all very rehearsed, months in advance, because horses have to be trained to fall over. All the fights are obviously choreographed. So, I think it was at least 4 months before they started filming that
and
they
how
shot
long?
all the choreography.
How long was the shoot for that?
I think that was 25 days in the field, and then same again with element shoot on the stage. I think someone told me they generated 100 hours of material for that sequence.
That would not surprise
Yeah,
me.
so, I mean, my trick for managing that is clear your diary and, and be across it every single day. You know, I make select reels, so I do, because obviously on a battle like that, they shoot one way and then they shoot the other way. So you've got nothing to cut to for the first couple of weeks anyway. So you're just building all the select reels with the coolest, what you consider to be the coolest bits of fighting or, I don't know, performance or whatever. And yeah, it just like, people always go, oh, how do you do that? But if you concentrate on it every day, it just builds like a, you know, the sequence just starts to build, and then everyone's like, oh, it looks amazing. And so you're like, Christ, I hope I make it look amazing.
I think, yeah, mission accomplished.
Well, eventually. I mean, it didn't, you know, it took a few weeks to get it like that. But yeah, pleased with the results. Oh, and I always point out the horses, every time you see them clash, there's one digital horse and one real horse.
I
so
wondered
obviously when we're
about
cutting that, we're just doing, I just have the falling horse. So they all went in afterwards and they were really successful. So any horse that's really close to the actors is generally a digital horse.
And how long did you have to cut that episode?
Not a huge amount. So I think, yeah, the 25 days it took to film it and about the same again to lock it.
Wow. Say that one more time. Yeah, and so I want to kind of get back to the effects conversation. So effects are used a lot these days, but you often don't see them. And so you're compositing two completely different takes together, or you're taking people out, or you're changing pixels here and there. And you touched on this, Peter, that's changed quite a bit from, you know, sort of traditional sitcoms of many years ago where you weren't doing that at all. So
it's a whole new door. It's a whole new thing, that a level of editing. Will and Grace, I mean, people tell us now that it looks better than the original show and all that. And one of the reasons why is because there are tricks via effects that allow you to hide large lifts or changes in programming and dialogue. Whether it's compositing the shoulder of somebody exiting a frame so that the cut to a different performance marries without having to wait for some head turn or whatever, or whether it's literally, last season there's an episode where Deborah's head is from a different performance than Eric and her body is. I changed out the head because that was the thing that made it easy. But to go back to it, even though this effect world is making things like timing and smoothness and all that kind of wonderful, the thing that I think I've heard from here is performance is everything. Performance is the first thing you go for, right? I mean, and with live stuff and with stuff in front of an audience, the magic that happens there are times that they might have said the line better in the next performance, but the magic is not there from the first performance. And when I start to edit something, the first thing I do is just start picking pieces and making that select reel. And it becomes a very choppy piece of like, oh, I want to be able to take that laugh, because also the laugh now is an actor. You have to treat the laugh like it's an actor. So, you know, okay, I want to take this piece of the laugh, this reaction, this, and you start building it out. And then you start going, oh, wow, these two pieces don't cut. Oh, wait, they will cut if I do a split screen from the last performance on this side of their head and the upcoming performance on this side. We get magic in a bottle in front of an audience within a couple of hours, 2 performances or something like that. These guys have hundreds of people taking their time shooting single camera and everything like that. It's a different game. Yeah. They don't have that same kind of, you have to salvage what you have because somebody has done it until they've done it right? Or hopefully.
I was going to say hopefully.
Not always, right?
Hopefully we have the time to put it together based on the footage that's coming in, which is one of the challenges nowadays. It's, you know, shorter and shorter time, but you have to get the product out. So for me, the way I work is, you know, I like to watch the dailies. I prefer to have my bigger scenes earlier in the day, so I can tackle those best. And it's just a matter, so for a series like 13 Reasons Why, It's a matter of just watching those performances, because although the actors are playing high school kids, they're not, they're in their 20s actually, so they're seasoned a little bit, but it's a matter of getting the right take, and then once you get the take, to see how far you can take it and make sure the emotion is there, and again, with 13 Reasons, it's a little bit different, and you can be a little bit more cinematic and stay back a little bit longer and things like that. Whereas with other shows, it's not that way. They want you to, get into coverage and play it all within the medium or the close-ups, which works, but it's not always the best way to do it. So
I'm going to contrast again with you, Meaghan, because although you have 8 cameras, you have 1 take that you're supposed to put together into 1 episode. So your constraints are pretty different.
Pretty different. I do scripted comedy that plays, to the crew, and then we have to put it together later. And I've done live comedy, which plays to an audience, and you have immediate feedback on what's working based on whether they laugh or not. So for Two Dope Queens, we had that immediate feedback. I did the 2 heaviest shows of the 4. They were, the one you just saw a clip from was 84 minutes, and then I think the other one was somewhere around 91. I think it broke the 90-minute mark. I remember it was like 91, 92.
And you cut it down to what was the final?
54:30. So the very first thing that we do is get it to time. So I had 3 days for each episode to produce my editor's cut to present to our director. Our director was Tig Notaro. So what's interesting for me is I've been working mostly with writers instead of sitting with the directors. Even though Tig directed this show, she is obviously a writer and a comedian and a performer herself. So that's what she brought to the editing room, is that sense of comedic timing, discussing sets and bits, sort of from the writing and the construction aspect. So if there were places where we could improve the timing in a delivery, we would tighten that. Not that, actually, I don't think we ever had to do that for this show. Everything was pretty tight. They had some really great performers. Mostly we just lost things for time. So I did a pass before she came in on each episode. I got them down to 54:30, which was our air slot, which was requested. Doing a show for HBO is cool because there's no commercial breaks, so you just get to keep going. Yeah. So my first pass is generally, I cut for me, whatever makes me laugh stays in. I also try to maintain the logic. I'll usually have I had my assistant watch it for logic. I'm like, to make sure that I didn't leave part of a joke dangling, because very often there's callbacks. Like there's a callback a few minutes later to that Dominique Dawes joke. So that pays off. So basically, if something makes me laugh, it stays in. If it pays off later, it stays in. And then every now and then, when you make a pre-tape, like at Conan, we would put together pre-tape comedy bits, which were scripted, and we would sit with the writer and we'd craft the jokes, and then they would play to the audience, and it was always interesting to see what would land and what didn't. So I got really good during my 4 years there at writing comedy accidentally. I started to think about it that way recently. I started to be able to see, just from the script, like, what will the timing be performance-wise? How will it land? Will the audience respond to it? Sometimes you're surprised. Sometimes something doesn't play really well live, and we will decide, well, we'll keep that in because the audience at home will really like it. Because sometimes you have to kind of psych out the audience. You're like, was that the right joke for this audience, or is it funny to watch it fail? Because failure is really funny when a live performer like goes for a bit and it does not land. Yeah. If they play it off though, if they kind of spin it like, ha ha ha, that was dumb. Sometimes that's really funny at home. Yeah. So basically, just whatever makes me laugh stays, and and then we work it out. And Tig would come in and say, oh, I really missed this joke. So there's this principle of and we worked this way at Conan because the writers would be on set during taping. Anything that happened spontaneously in the unscripted pieces that wasn't in my editor's cut, the writers would immediately notice when they came in, because they were basically the directors of those pieces. They would come into the edit and they would watch it, and they'd say, oh, I really missed that thing. He did some business with the paperclip or whatever. I missed that. And so Jess and Phoebe had moments like that too.
And you'd have to pull it back in.
And we'd have to pull it back in, but we didn't do too much of that. Mostly we did that we lost a lot of the live stuff. They did a lot of improv. So we had a wealth of stuff in between. The actual stand-up sets, the format of the show was that there were 3 stand-ups and then a guest for an interview type segment. So the stand-up sets were already very, very polished and tight and to time because they're used to performing to time. They do a tight 5. And so they did that. They came, they performed. It was great. So it was mostly managing all of the interstitial stuff, like it's not really a monologue, it's a duologue, and then everything in between all the stand-ups and the guests. So they would tell various stories, and we tried to stay on theme with the podcast, try to make the comedy topical to the theme.
So I want to ask you, Tim, about Game of Thrones. So there's lots of sort of interesting parameters to the show, one of which is that not all the episodes are the same length. They're not nearly all the same as far as how the story is told or how many characters may be featured in a particular episode. But I think one thing that's really constant is there's a lot of effects work. So as an editor, how do you approach the cut, like kind of anticipating where effects are going to have to get slotted in? Are you yourself doing any temp effects as you cut, or how do you approach that?
Couple of ways. There's previs elements, so we take the green screen elements from there if there's dragons or whatever, so we get to use those and put them in the back of our shots. The assistants are all well versed in that. I don't do it myself. Don't have time, and I don't really know how to do it anymore anyway. And yeah, with the big effects shots, there's thousands of shots in an episode, but with the big effects shots, if we've got a dragon or a giant, they're planned. So they go where they go, and they are what they are.
Yeah.
But for example, in the battle, there's loads of different things we'll spot, like additional blood in every shot or smoke continuity, so simple stuff like that going through. So we will have smoke plates and stuff we had, and block the sun out and stuff, 25 days filming in the field. Sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's, so all of that stuff we're spotting. So basically in a sequence like that, every single shot has a number and is being touched by visual effects one way or another.
And then how many other editors are working on a season with you of Game of Thrones?
There's 3 of us.
There's 3 of you. So you each get a handful of episodes that you're editing. And then how do you work together, right, to make the whole season cohesive? Like how are you guys working together, or gals?
2 guys, 1 girl, yeah. We don't really work together. We're all friends, actually, but so we kind of go into each other's cutting rooms and show stuff to each other and talk about it so we all know. Or say there's a storyline that's crossing over in episodes, we'll go in there and say, hey, how's this going? How did this end up? Because I'm picking them up here. Is that right? So that stuff like that. But they've also, there's executive producers and showrunners that, keep you in line.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jacques, when we were chatting the other day, you mentioned that you've worked with your showrunner for a while, and you have a good relationship, and so you kind of know where they're going to be coming from while you're cutting. I
do. So that's for the series. It's called Love Is. The finale just aired Tuesday night. That's on Oprah's network. I cut the pilot. The executive producer was Mara Brock Akil. She's a creator of Love Is, Girlfriends, Being Mary Jane, and her husband is Salim Akil, and he created the series Black Lightning, which is on CW. I worked with Mara on Being Mary Jane, and so I was working on 13 Reasons Why, and we hadn't finished up the season yet. So we ended up locking all of the episodes for 13 Reasons Why very late. So as I was cutting the finale, I had 4 other episodes sitting out there. So I'm working on those 4 episodes with the executive producer, cutting the finale. And then once they stopped production, we were able to start locking episodes. But I got a call from Mara. She said she was going to be directing the pilot for this new series, and she wanted me to cut it. So I got along so well with her previously that I decided to leave and cut the pilot for. So it's not every day, well, at least it's not for me, I don't know about you guys, but that a showrunner calls you and they want you to cut their pilot for a new series. So I was able to help her shape the pilot. I stayed on for the series as the supervising editor. We got the season 2 pickup, so I guess we did a good job. But it's important to have those relationships because it's so easy in the cutting room. It's you know, you have a shorthand. You're able to be creative, and being creative allows you to be that artist that I think that we all are or aspire to be. And so when you can start there, it's not about work. It's just about, you know, putting your best foot forward. And then, you know, once you're able to do that, when the showrunner does come in or when the director does come in, it's just a matter of fine-tuning. You're playing. You're finding those gems, those little pieces. Most of the heavy work is already done. And so by having that relationship with Mara, I have a lot of creative freedom before even the director or she comes into the room in order to try different things and present different things, have different versions of things in order to tell the best story. And that's the way it works.
So, Peter, you're working on kind of an interesting show in that it's a reboot. And I can't remember how long ago Will and Grace originally aired.
It was 9 years.
Yeah, about 10 years ago or so. And a lot has changed in television production since then. But you're coming back to a show that was really well loved. It was on for many seasons. Like, people are, you know, bonded to this show. So what kind of constraints or sort of concerns does that introduce for you as an editor as you're picking up this brand new season?
Concerns, none. I have to say, this is kid in a candy store.
Oh.
I have the best job right now. Because, first of all, 18 episodes. There's no pickups anymore right now with 18 episodes. It's the only reboot that made sense. And like yourself, I work with the writers more than anybody else. In fact, Jimmy Burrows shoots the show. I don't see Jimmy. I mean, I know that's legally not proper for the Directors Guild. The director gets the first cut, but Jimmy waives it because we trust each other, and he's got a whole show to do. He's got so much work to do on that side. He doesn't want to spend the time here. So I work with the writers. I work with the showrunners, the head showrunners, and I honor the script first. So and what's interesting, because I didn't work on the first series, the first Will and Grace, I was doing Golden Girls or other shows at that time, is that they tell me now Max and Dave are more serious about this show than they were the first go around. They were younger, they were wilder and everything. Now they realize the weight the show has. And when he approached it, he says, we're gonna make, the first season was, we're gonna make 12 special episodes. And now we're locked. We did well last year. We made some good episodes. So we're trying to not fail.
Right.
is the deal.
It's a little bit of a burden.
But it's good because my passion with doing this stuff is what I live on. So I'm happy for the work, and it's a fun group of people. You know, they're divas now. The actors are all big, you know. They've all got their thing going on, and they don't want to rehearse. You know, they spend a few hours at the thing, and there's like 13 writers that, you know, are all going at it trying to make their way, and we got some exec producers, and, you know, Burrows is a kind of an old curmudgeon. I mean, he's really just, you know, we're gonna shoot it twice. You know, no, Jimmy, you're gonna shoot it more. But so. As a reboot, you know, I don't know. I've never worked on a reboot before, but it's a new show for me for this group, and it's good.
Yeah,
it's good.
So, Tim, you also cut The Crown, correct? So, contrast that for us with Game of Thrones. I mean, it's an entirely different type of show. What's your work like or your approach like for The Crown?
I don't know. It's much the same as anything. You get the material, and you cut it.
Yeah, but there's
How many
Tim,
digital
really,
horses are in
really
the
tell us
crown?
what it's like.
so probably fewer bloodbath type
Exactly. It's
scenes.
actually, I find it harder.
Really?
Yeah, because the action sequences, like I say, they build and I get an idea in my head and I chase it, whereas this, you really are picking a performance and you're letting it play and you're going to be judged on your taste. And so actually I found it harder in some ways, particularly the first couple of weeks until I sort of director turns around and goes, oh, I do like that.
And the type of scenes that you're cutting are those longer monologues or dialogues like Jacques was talking about, where you really are just relying on the person to carry the scene.
But I think it's just experience. I've been doing this for 18 years now, so I think that you get used to different styles, and you get to a show, you watch it, you talk to the directors, you talk to the other editors, you watch the episodes, and you have a feel for what hopefully is wanted. And so you take it from there. Yeah, I don't try and put my mark on anything, or hopefully there is a mark on it, but I don't actively go, hey, I'm going to invent the wheel on this show and put some jump cuts in it.
Right. Yeah, the Queen might frown on that.
Might not.
Well, I would love to open it up for some questions from the attendees, because I know you all usually come up with some questions while we're doing these panels, and I want to give you an opportunity. So if you have a question, hop up and we'll make sure we get a mic to you. Oh.
This one's for Tim. I'm wondering, in that long shot behind Jon Snow in Battle of the Bastards, how many moments of visual effects are there? Because I assume there's blood and a horse, so I'm just wanting to know purely like a number, like what's in there.
I honestly don't know, but there's at least half and half. So for every real horse is in there, there's a digital horse. There's lots of additional people fighting in the backgrounds that they were all shot on the green screen stage. So in the back of the shot, there's loads of people plugged into the back fighting. That's actually that's a one, but it was 3 shots stitched together basically, and they shot that, and we turned it over the next day because it had to go off, and so I think it went to Australia to have the horses put in. So yeah, that was a quick turnaround. There was like 20 takes of each section, and so yeah, that was actually the easiest bit for me.
All right. Oh, there's a question right down. We'll get you a mic in just a second. Here, I'll come to you because I'm actually closer.
I kind of had a question for everybody, and it was about the relationship that you guys have with your assistants, because I'm sure that it changes depending on the content that you're working on and how the show is structured. So I was curious, do you guys have multiple assistants? Do you just have one? And what is like their handle in, pulling selects or doing sound or anything like that?
And maybe we can just go down the line. So Peter, you can start.
Really? Let's go.
Well, or we can start. Meaghan, why don't we start with?
I'll start.
Okay.
Two Dope Queens had 3 assistants. They did 4 tapings across 3 days. The assistants with 8 cameras each. So that's like, what, 8
a lot of work
for 32 cameras. It was a lot of work for the assistants. They had 3 assistants who did the ingest. They set everything up for us. And they made a split viewer because we had no line cut. They had to make what's called the multicam view, which is where you can watch all 8 cameras live. If you've never done a live show, that's how directors and technical directors do the line cut. They train themselves to watch all 8 cameras at once and cut to the correct camera. So the assistants created that for me. So when I came in, I had 2 shows worth of stuff. My assistant, Chelsea Taylor, was super awesome. And she made that string out for me.
What about you, Tim? How many assistants are you working with?
We have, on Thrones, we have 1 each, and then there's some trainees as well. So yeah, the assistants on Game of Thrones worked really hard because, they're doing all the temp sound and temp visual effects, and so they're chosen for their skill set. You have to do a little bit of everything. On The Crown, it's different because, as previously discussed, it might be a gentle scene and a few footsteps and a door closing, but you've got to open all your audio tracks up on Thrones, and yeah, try and make it sound like a movie if possible.
Right, right. And Jacques, what about, well, you're working kind of on 2 shows, so are they different as far as your assistants?
Pretty much every show I've been on has been different. So Love Is was 2 assistants, and then we added a third midway through. 13 Reasons was 3 assistants, 3 editors, 3 assistants. I've been on shows that were heavy visual effects. Years ago, I kept Battlestar Galactica, heavy visual effects. That was 3 editors, 2 assistants. That's not the way to go. But I mean, I rely on my assistants to, do everything. I like to cut music myself when I'm doing those kind of shows, but I rely on my assistants for visual effects, cutting sound, and when necessary to, put a scene together when crunched for time. So.
Okay.
Your turn.
I have usually, I've worked on single camera shows where I've had a couple of assistants and everything like that, but I've had one assistant that follows me around. It's very common to them to come along as the editor. Of those, 4 of them have now become editors. Cool. Chris Poulos is one of them right now that's really shining. He's out there. And it's amazing because all of my assistants, I've thrown all of the information that I do, and I know I will share it with them, but it doesn't stick with them, a lot of them. And the ones that it did, that's why I've got 4 assistants who've become editors. My current assistant is new to this season. He's really good. He has technical skills. Because remember, we now shoot digital cards in the cameras. They come out of the camera and go to my assistant. He has the possibility of losing the show, right? And so he
no
takes
pressure.
No pressure, right? He takes those cards and he copies them and duplicates them and stuff like that. And Karina, my post coordinator, is here too. She's part of that whole thing. And then after he's done that, he ingests it all into my Avid and groups them and Scripster. I don't know if you guys use Scripter. I mean, is that a common thing?
Same as ScriptSync.
Is ScriptSync?
It's all the same thing.
It's all the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because I want to be able to go double click. Hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? And pick my performances and stuff. So he does all that and everything, and I show up and I can just work. And when I'm done with the cut, I say, okay, it's done, ship it, and he takes care of it. Nice. So, and I need that from all of them. There are people I'm willing to train early on. I can't train anybody anymore.
And is that just because schedules are really compressed and you just have a lot to get through?
You started bringing up the streaming stuff and everything. Oh my gosh, my assistant, stuff that I would have cut myself in the past, I don't have time to cut anymore. So stuff for the extras for the web and all that other kind of crap, that I just throw it all on him, them. Whoever it is.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point that you bring up because there are always extras now, right? There's stuff that shows on YouTube and there's little ads and all kinds of stuff, behind the scenes footage that everyone keeps. HBO does a ton of those kinds of promotions where they'll go behind the scenes on a certain episode. So what about you, Tim? Are you doing those extra things also, or you just stick to the show and someone else takes care of all that?
No, that's a different department.
Yeah. Like promotions or marketing or something.
Yeah, the amount of work that assistant editors have to do now is much different than when I came up as an assistant, and they have to, they're constantly working with the APs to do all kinds of stuff, and it's a heavy load, and it's unfortunate because it takes them away from us on the things that we need with already shortened schedules. So assistant editors nowadays, for those of you out there, I know it's a big load, but it's in my opinion, it's not right either. It's not right. I've had assistants in the past. Most of my assistants ultimately do go on to edit, those that want to, and I mentor as well. Within ACE, the ACE Mentor Diversity Mentor Program, which is new and was not around when I came up. But I mentor, I try to help assistants, but now, and I've told my assistants this in the past, if I was an assistant now, with all the stuff that they have to do, being pulled in all the different directions, I don't know if I would have stuck it out to become an editor. I really don't, because it's just, the burden is just, I think, is too much, and you can't really learn your craft. You're being pulled in so many different directions.
So yeah, brings up a question. The workload's never going to get lighter, probably. Do you all try to consciously find, opportunities to help your assistants get more of the creative, experience while you're working with them? I know it's awfully hard, but is that something that you try and, help them out with? Can you? Do you have the time?
Yeah, at the start of the show, the first few weeks before it gets too heavy, they definitely get to assemble scenes for me, and we talk about it. But even along the way, because they're doing the sound for us and stuff, they're heavily involved in the sequence as it's evolving. So I'm sure they're picking stuff up. So I think they're learning that way now, and maybe not always cutting, but just seeing the sequence evolve and being part of that, a big part of that. Presumably you're learning from that.
It's the trust thing. You start them off, you give them something simple to do that, and then it grows. But the thing that they're not getting, what you were saying, is so much of this, there's so many disciplines to this job. There's not only good picture and good composition and good sound and all of that. There's also understanding and being empathetic with the character on screen and how the viewer is going to be taking care of that, and what that reaction means, and all of those subtlety things. And in the old days, there was lots of times to discuss those with the assistant. But now they're doing so many technical jobs and cranking out all of that. They don't get a chance to sit there and do the art, like you were saying. So it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And that's what I try to do is like you say, you give them a little scene to cut or something like that, and then but as the trust gets, you get better and better with it,
One of the reasons that I was what I used to call a career assistant until about 4 or 5 years ago at Conan, it is very different when you get stuck being looked at as a technical workhorse. It's great because you get hired a lot by editors.
They're like, oh, she's super good at that.
Especially if they know you can cut as well, because you can get through a massive volume of dailies for your editor. You can do a string out. And you can help them cut scenes, and you can throw things to promo department much more quickly when they know that you're an editor, but you're working as an assistant. And I have a lot of friends who do that. They work, they want to work in episodic, or they want to work in unscripted or whatever. And a lot of people will get promoted to editor now in television, and then they want to go into features. You take a job as an assistant. I'm doing that right now. Actually, I'm assisting on a feature. I assisted earlier this summer on a film that had no dailies lab, so they hired me as the first assistant. It was very low budget. They're like, we know you're an editor, but we don't have a dailies lab, and also we may or may not need help assembling this, because they had a very short turnaround. So that's something that you get kind of pegged as when you work as an assistant for a long time, and then so editors all know, like, oh, that's great, you can cut. The showrunners may or may not know, your peers may or may not know that you are actually classed as an editor but working as an assistant, things like that, because there is so much to know. You have to know all the different softwares. Like, I cut on Adobe and I cut on Avid. And that's a conversation now that happens when people want to hire you for the job.
Well, and within that, you need to know the technology
to be an expert.
really, really deeply. It's a huge part of the assistant's role. So how did you specifically make the transition from assistant to editor? And was that difficult for you to then just stay as an editor and not,
I've gone back and forth many times. People don't realize this, I guess, because I don't talk. None of us talk about this a lot, those of us that go back and forth, because you're constantly trying to brand yourself as whatever you want to work on right then. I know a lot of people who are like, oh, how do I get into scripted? Like, well, just, edit your resume a certain way. Get the experience, find someone who will promote you. Originally, I used to do corporate stuff. 19 years ago, I started in commercials on Avid. Everything was on tape, or on film, transferred to beta tape, And that was one workflow I learned, and then I became an editor in the commercial corporate world, and then I became an assistant in scripted, and then I became an assistant in unscripted, and then I got promoted to editor on that show because they had way too much stuff. They got more and more and more content, and so they said, all right, we're gonna have to promote our assistant to editor because there's just too much stuff to cut and we need another editor. And now I wanna work I've decided I wanna do a lot more I want to go back to scripted, but not in episodic. I want to try to do feature-length stuff. So I spent the past year.
An assistant.
Well, yeah, I cut a feature, a very small feature last summer myself as the editor, where I was my own assistant. It was a non-union, very small film. And I'm on my third feature this year. I was an assembly editor, and then I was a first assistant, and now I'm a first assistant again. So it's a constant moving back and forth and trying to be seen, like I'm really trying to be seen as someone who can do the artistic stuff right now. But that's an interesting thing that I talk about very often with people I'd like to work with people who'd like to work with me. Yeah. What that's like to switch hit. And it's hard because at some point I need to stop calling myself an assistant and just really go for these jobs. But I was looking for a mentor this year, and I found a really great editor.
Yes.
Who's taken me into her cutting room. And it's been a really, really great experience for me. But I'm fortunate that I can work as an assistant.
Yeah, yeah. Other questions? We probably have time for another one or two. Pop your hand up. Oh, here, right in the front. I will walk to you. Wait, oh, okay, Jenny's coming. Okay. I got to make Jenny work for a paycheck.
Jenny's quick.
Hi, this is for Jacques. 13 Reasons Why has a lot of interesting transitions from the past to the future, contextually through the show. I just wanted to know, what was your process like in getting those edits and getting those cuts, because they feel really smooth? And actually, I have one question for Tim. Can you tell me how Game of Thrones ends?
I bet Tim's answer is going to be real short.
A lot of the transitions in 13 Reasons are actually planned out. They're in camera. And then, so we do temps in the Avid. Some of them are just as simple as, putting the two pieces together. The camera's moving, and then finding the right spot to cut, throwing a dissolve on, little color correction afterwards, and then it happens. Others are just planned out ahead of time in the camera and via visual effects. Some of them were pretty challenging. There were some in season 2. There's one where Clay is driving his car, and he looks out the window to the left, and so he's driving present, looks out the window, sees himself in the past, and he's putting the bike down. And then as he's putting the bike down, the double knelt down, and then when he comes back up, we're around the other side. But they did it multiple times, and there was only one take that worked, and this was supposed to be planned out. And so when the director came in, he was told on the day, no, we got it, everything lined up, everything's perfect, but it didn't. And it was just by me combing through the dailies and finding the take that was not supposed to be used that ended up working, was the way that we were able to temp it in order to sell that enough to let them know that they could go in with visual effects and do it. So it was a combination. Stuff in camera, me doing things in the Avid, and that's basically how they do it. So, but they're thought out, and a lot of them are written in the script. So, but I have a pretty good visual effects background. I came up as an assistant years ago on the Star Trek franchises, and we did a lot of that. So, and I hung out with those guys quite a bit, just kind of picking their brains to see, how they did stuff, which was a little bit different back in the day. But yeah, so some are written, some are planned out, and then some are us in the Avid just, trying to figure it out. So.
All right, right here.
This question is for Tim. I'm wondering, since with Game of Thrones they shoot like 2 episodes at the same time in 2 totally different locations. So what's the workflow like, and like when you get on and there's like 3 editors, so it's like, how does the editing process, and then also with notes from the producers and the showrunners, and they're probably far away and they don't come back to the States till after a long time. How does all that happen?
Yeah, well, there's always been 2 units every day. One's based in Belfast on the stage, and the other unit travels around locations in Europe, basically, and there's a dailies team on both units, and they get sent down the pipe overnight, and when you walk in the morning, it's all there. It's a very well-staffed department. There's like 2 DITs, and there's about 4 people in the dailies department, and then they get coloured as well. And yeah, then the 3 assistants pull whatever's for them that day, and they organise it for us. Yeah, they shoot whatever scenes they need to shoot from that location. So, yeah, we're all on from the beginning, because you could have scenes from any episode on any day. They don't shoot them in an episode order.
All right. Oh, there's a question way in the back.
Thank you. So this is for Jacques and Tim, since you both have experience on VFX-heavy shows. I wanted to know, like, when you are in the assembly phase, like, if there's maybe a glaring hole where VFX are going to have to go, can you request previs, or can you call for that ahead of time? And then I guess the second part is, once you've achieved picture lock, like, what level of communication do you have with the visual effects editor, if any, and or you kind of walk away from the episode and you're just done?
Yeah, when I lock picture, I do walk away. If there's any major changes that come in, they're good enough to send the change. And if you've got a real problem with it, which I generally don't, you can have a say still. Yeah. What was the first part of the question?
Oh, well, like requesting previs.
Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. It's a fluid place to work. If you think you need something, you can totally ask for it. Absolutely.
So on the shows that I've been on, if there's an issue with visual effects, I just pick up the phone or have my assistant call, just to find out, what the thought process was, what happened in the visual effects meeting, where this is ultimately going to go. I haven't been on shows where I've been able to request visual effects. I've been on previs. I've been on some shows in the past, again, Battlestar, where they did previs for us. And then visual effects artists would come in the room, and we'd have conversations. And that's always helpful. So a little bit of both there.
All right, well, I think we should probably wrap it up. But again, I want to thank all of you for coming today and for sharing your experiences. It's always fascinating. I would love to talk with all of you all day long, and I'm sure you will be hounded by all these people once we're at lunch break. So thank you.
That was great. Thanks again, Peter, Jacques, Tim, Meaghan. Thank you so much. And Margot, wonderful panel.